Not all school districts understand how you can engage with economic development corporations and the benefit of that. Not all economic development corporations really understand deep engagement with school districts, and but really, I've seen a number of studies, more and more, that have come out and indicated that if you want economic development, the most bang for your buck is developing your people. If you develop your workforce, your current and your future workforce, that's actually worth more than you need a mixture. But some economic development corporations, the main thing they focus on is getting, the bigger ones, it's like getting a manufacturing firm, and that's understandable. But they're not going to come if you're not developing your workforce.
Yes.
And the little ones, like, they're real excited if they get a new Dairy Queen in town or whatever, which is understandable, right?
Yes. Dr. Daniel King, you are the Executive Director of Region 1. Region 1 covers South Texas. Talk to us about what Region 1 is, and specifically I'm going to call them markets.
Okay.
What markets
Sure.
you all cover.
And they are markets.
Yeah.
So Region 1 is one of 20 educational service regions in the state of Texas. So the legislature has divided public education into 20 service sectors, and this was done through legislation back in the 1960s, and to get more boots on the ground, technical assistance out to ISDs. So Region 1 is sort of a intermediary in a way between the state, between Texas Education Agency and the school districts. We're non-regulatory, and so the service centers were created to provide technical assistance to help districts be more effective, to help them be more efficient, so sometimes through economies of scale and so forth. I can tell you, when I took this job a little over 2 years ago, the commissioner, put it really succinctly to me. He said, Dr. King, I'm going to hold you accountable for improved student performance throughout Region 1, but you have no authority. So we're not. Some people will contact us thinking that we're over the school districts. We're not over the school districts. We're side by side with them.
Yeah.
But we are responsible. We drive some state initiatives, but we're kind of unique because we're also entrepreneurial. So we drive some of the state initiatives on school improvement and things like that. We also provide all kinds of assistance that districts reach out to us for help for advice, everything from purchasing at economies of scale, especially for the smaller districts. So we form purchasing cooperatives and so forth. But we also provide technical assistance for improving instruction in the classroom, improving curriculum design and things like that. Now, in almost all cases, there's a few exceptions, but in almost all cases, we're a provider of choice, meaning districts don't have to use us either. Okay. So that's what when the commissioner said, "But you have no authority." So we have to sell ourselves in a way where that's why I said also entrepreneurial.
Yes.
So
you're like consultants.
We have to convince through our expertise, through what we can bring to the table, to bring in solutions. So we're responsible. I mentioned 20 regions, and we cover our service area. Covers 8 counties, and so we run along the border. So we provide service to about 48 school systems, wow, both ISDs and charter schools, from Brownsville to Laredo, and we run like two counties deep along the border. So we have Cameron and Willacy, we have Hidalgo and Brooks, we have Starr, we have Jim Hogg, we have Zapata, and we have Webb County. And so we cover those 8 counties and all of the 8 ISDs within those, serving about 430,000 students. And so that's kind of our responsibility, like I said, is to be the partner on the side to bring them solutions, bring them ideas, bring them training. Like I said, drive different state initiatives. We don't have a tax base, and our guaranteed funding stream is very small. but the state contracts us to drive some of their initiatives. School districts contract us. We apply for grants that focus on areas that where school districts are requesting assistance, or where we see that maybe they're struggling with, and so forth. So we like to, when we can, the districts contract us, but we also like to bring resources to the table and say we have a funder. For example, we have a funder, or we know of a funding source for this initiative, and we can either partner with you, or we can train you, or whatever the case may be. And we also engage at whatever level the district wants to. So sometimes it's simply advice, give them the information. Sometimes it's deep consultation, and we've actually here recently gotten somewhat engaged in some cases even contracting to take care of some of their operations for them.
Wow.
So.
Right now, school districts, specifically across Region 1, are facing, big issues with budgets.
Right.
You were previously the superintendent at PSJA for 14 years.
12 years.
12 years.
And 8 years at Hidalgo. So I spent 20 years as a superintendent.
And so you've balanced many budgets.
Yes.
And, the region that you serve, the school districts that you're saying that, hey, we don't have any, regulatory authority. We can't force these school districts to work with us. I feel like Region 1 right now is probably, your phone's ringing probably now more than ever.
We do get a lot of calls, and then, also believe in being proactive. So we've been presenting to the districts just really a very thorough analysis of all the ways within legislation that maybe are not, in some cases, are not as deeply commonly known or understood, or some of them might take a little more, they're more complicated to access, or might take more creativity. So currently I still have a few to go, but I've met with almost all the superintendents throughout the 8 counties, and really gone through that in depth, and that's been very, very favorably received. Where while it's not the amount of money they were, let's say, hoping for from the legislature, and for every district it's different. I've shown them where they can get a little bit of breathing room and maybe bridge that gap a little bit by looking at all these different ways. A lot of it work I learned over, like I said, 20 years of experience as a superintendent, and then some additional things in legislation. And Texas Education Agency has been an assistance with that. I'm working with all the 20 of us, and also providing ideas and thoughts from there. Where's potential funding streams that districts may not be maximizing or optimizing.
Yeah, and you recently, the Hidalgo Prosperity Task Force was recently created by Hidalgo County Judge Richard Cortez. You are part of that.
Yes. That
task force. What is your role there?
So my role there, I serve on a couple of subcommittees. My primary emphasis, of course, is Education Committee. And I also serve on the workforce committee. Education and workforce are just hand in hand.
Yes,
and I think that's become more understood and more obvious in recent years. And I'll give you an example. I can remember a decade or so ago arguments in the legislatures about should we focus on college readiness or career readiness, and we're going too far this way. And today they've kind of resolved it by saying they're pretty much the same thing. And a lot of the things that it takes to be ready to be successful in the workforce are in many cases the same things that for college, especially now when you look in the workforce, where in many cases, IT skills, at least some minimal basis of working with technology, coming together in groups to come up with solutions, etc. So a lot of that, there's so much similarity now. It will increase even more as artificial intelligence comes more and more to play. So the kind of thinking and work that it takes, let's say, to go in as a freshman in college and be able to succeed and complete your projects and all of that is very similar when you go into workplace for more and more jobs. Probably the majority of jobs today, and just an increasing number of jobs. The same thing to go in and problem solve and complete projects and work with a team and a cross-sector team and all this kind of stuff. So today in Texas now they've kind of phrased it college, career, and military readiness, kind of saying for whether you're going into your career, whether you're going into the military, which could be a career, could be a temporary, a short-term thing, or whether you're going into higher education. There's a if you picture a Venn diagram, there's a large crossover in the skills and both soft skills and hard skills that are needed to succeed in any of those arenas.
So at PSJA, you were the pioneer in dual enrollment and dropout recovery.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to us a little bit about that and how has that evolved since you started?
Yeah, and that work actually started in Hidalgo. It just got big scale and got more attention in PSJA. Actually, when I was in Hidalgo, we started the first early college high school in South Texas. And one of the first, let's say, 7 or 8 in the state of Texas, and they're still doing that there. And we focused real heavily on dropout. Now it was a small school system, so the number of dropouts was not a significant number, right? But we still focused on it. In PSJ, it was different. There was minimal dual enrollment going on. And the dropout rate when I got there in 2007 was huge. It was more than double the state average. PSJ came out, all 3 high schools at that time, comprehensive high schools, came out in a national report called the Dropout Factory Report that identified 50, 80 something high schools around the nation that said what they produce most, more than anything else, is dropouts. So they should be known as dropout factories. And so we got to work. When I entered, we got to work on the dropout situation immediately. We started an initiative called Countdown to Zero, where we diligently tracked down every single student that withdrew from school and so forth. And in 1 year, we were able to go from double the state average to the state average, and in 2 years, we were able to go to half the state average of dropouts, and then kind of drove it down to about a third the state average. This is kind of where PSJ has continued to run in that range since about 2011 or so, 2010, 2011. One part of that was just really being accountable for every student and making sure that, we did both work within the school to not lose students, and then also that we were very almost obsessive compulsive about getting any student back in school. Even if they had moved to another part of the state or another state, we would work to reconnect them to school wherever they were. So we took accountability for our students.
No matter where they were.
No matter where they were. And the second component of that, it just so happened that as I was entering PSJ, I did what I had become accustomed to do as superintendent. A legislative session had just ended in 2007. And so I was reviewing the different laws and bills and things like that. And there was a bill, House Bill 1137, that had some changes to school finance, how much money per pupil, this and that, the other. And as I was reading that, and I always pay attention to legislatures, I saw public school funding had always stopped at age 21. And I saw some language in there that said to age 26, and it just kind of blew my mind, like it's a typo or whatever. And I called Austin to a finance guru, and he said,
"Is this right? Am I seeing this right?"
Yeah, and he didn't know about it, and he read it, and he says, "That's what it says." He says, "Let me call TA."
Wow.
And he called accounting staff, pupil accounting staff, and so forth, TA, and they didn't know about it. And but they read it, and they said, because I said so. Years later, I found out. Well, really, about a year later, I ran across a very powerful legislator that had inserted that language, and he had done it without much hoopla.
Yes.
And but his intent, he was both shocked and amazed what I had done with it, because I opened a high school with it, I opened a high school in 2007 for 18 to 26-year-olds. And he told me, I didn't know you could do that with what I did, but I'm glad you did. In his mind, because he had also put some hour-by-hour attendance accounting, in his mind it was, there's been a challenge in the state ever since about approximately 1988 when the state of Texas implemented exit exams as part of the graduation requirements. So you've got to pass some tests, not just get your grades in your courses, but the state wants to give you a test to make sure you really learned at least a minimal of what we expect. And since that came to play, every year there's, across the state, thousands of young people that maybe pass all their classes, but don't get a diploma because they don't pass some of those. And so many school districts would do tutoring for those young people and so forth. And sometimes they're over 21 and they failed the test 5 years earlier or whatever, and they come back and ask the school to help them. So many schools were letting them sit in on Saturday tutoring classes or evening tutoring classes. And this Representative Scott Hogberg, long since retired, he was the vice chair of public ed at the time. He had visited some high schools in Houston and saw this, and he thought, this is a statewide issue. The state should support this instead of the school districts just taking it on their own dime and their own time. So he had inserted this change in language that the funding could be up to age 26, never envisioning someone would open a school with it, just thinking of those evening hour and hour. Fortunately, I did not know his intent. And so when I saw it, maybe ignorance is bliss sometimes, right? So when I saw it and I was facing this huge dropout problem at PSJ, I was like, wow, I can not only, because I was already going out to get last year's seniors, I hadn't graduated and everything. I was thinking, wow, I can go after, since PSJ had a high dropout rate for a long time, I was like, wow, I can go after past generations of high school students, and that will really be a big boost to this community. At the time, of course, a community of high poverty. If you can think back to the 90s and early 2000s and so forth, PSJ, a lot of gang activity, etc. And a lot of that also comes from when you have a lot of young people and young adults out there that are undereducated, unemployed, underemployed. It's not surprising that you'll have a larger percent. I mean, you're always going to have some people, right, that turn to crime, etc., right? But it's not surprising that you're going to have a larger percent of people that do that when they're not able to achieve their quality of life goals through the accepted manner. So we opened that high school in September of 2007.
An old Walmart building.
And a Walmart building. And actually, we reached out immediately to STC because I knew that if I was going to go, especially the older ones, I knew that I needed a hook, and I knew also that if these were individuals who had struggled in school and maybe they were older, I knew that they needed something besides just a diploma. And so I reached out to STC and asked, would you partner, and we can help these young people get certificates and associate degrees or whatever and help them achieve their goals. And so STC came right to the table. Also, VIDA came to the table. Workforce Solutions came to the table. And so we kind of planned this out. We actually opened it up within weeks and found a little bit of space in an old Walmart building that the FAR Economic Development Corporation had remodeled, renovated, acquired from Walmart, and renovated some years ago under a different workforce program where there were community workforce training centers. And that particular model had gone out of vogue, and the funding for that model had gone away. And so they were leasing almost the whole building to the county to store voting machines. And it had all these nice training rooms set up and all that. And so
it was destiny. So
most of it was filled with voting machines. And then there were a few nonprofits and such in there and using different rooms. And so PSJ at the time was growing fast, was overcrowded, had no classroom space, was bringing in tons of portables every year. And so somebody came to me and they told me they could kind of squeeze the voting machines into less rooms and give me a few classrooms. So they gave me a few classrooms. We started out, we went after the seniors that hadn't graduated the year before. There were 237 of them. We brought in 200. We were able to bring in 223 out of the 237.
Wow.
And
you provided lunch?
And, well, everything like regular school, you know. We did do half-day schooling instead of whole day. And,
so they could work.
And you do get, with high school students, you do get full funding if they're in the seat at least 4 hours. And so we brought them in. We had split shift, morning and afternoon. Of course, we fed them, but yes, so they could work. Some have children already, et cetera, et cetera. They have their life to take care of. It's hard to get a 25-year-old and say, you got to come. Even in college, you don't go to school every day, all day.
Drop everything you're doing.
Yeah, and drop everything you're doing. So we graduated 49 that first December, and it just created a big boost in the community and just kept on rolling. And that in the spring, we started bringing in the older ones over 21, and eventually we started taking over more of the building like an amoeba, and then we ultimately bought it from the FAR EDC. So we wound up buying the building and basically converting the whole building into, and then again, STC partnered with us, and they brought in equipment. They brought in electrical trades equipment, precision manufacturing equipment, HVAC air conditioning equipment, so that we could run the training programs right there. And so we had an MOU there that when we were using it, they could use it for college, for their own traditional college students, or their continuing ed or whatever they wanted. And then obviously when our students needed it, that we could use it. And so all of that went very, very well. We graduated in the 12 years I was there. We graduated in the neighborhood of 3,000 18 to 26-year-olds, which was huge impact on the community.
Very.
The model was actually copied in different ways. Not everybody did. In fact, most did not do the dual enrollment, but school districts from pretty much, I would say, from Brownsville to at least Rio Grande City. A lot of especially not so much your small districts, but any of your mid-sized to large districts all opened a program within, La Jolla and Los Fresnos opened one the very next semester. And you
got to learn quick.
Actually, Los Fresnos opened one like a month or two after us, and then La Jolla in January. And before long, it was, at least the concept of educating 18 to 26-year-olds. And I would estimate, just based on towards the end of retirement and just hearing reports from different districts, but I would estimate that probably in the neighborhood of 5,000 18 to 26-year-olds across the region received their high school diploma through this. And then, like I said, not everybody did the dual enrollment or the workforce training, but at least helping to get the high school diploma. And then some of the students that we brought in, I can think right now of a young man that we brought in, and he was 20. He had just turned 26, and today he has a bachelor's degree and he's a teacher there in PSJ. And he was a 26-year-old dropout, so many of these students had great potential. Over the years, then I retired in September 2019, and
what a year!
And
if you had just waited one more year, I don't think they would have let you out.
A few more months, I wouldn't have let myself out. I had no idea what was going to hit us. Right. In fact, I got accused by some of my fellow superintendents of having
you knew
inside scoop, right? But I retired, and of course the pandemic hit, and a lot of the programs, through both that and some other struggles with it, and also struggling, the state was adjusting the accountability system and how they rate schools a couple of times during that period. And sometimes the adjustments unintentionally did not help with working with this kind of student. And so between that and the pandemic, many of the district, and also during the pandemic, as you realize, nobody was prepared for that.
Not at all.
Nobody had given thought to, we're going to do all virtual school for all kids. Teachers were not trained on how to do that. School districts didn't have, for the most part, everybody's a different place, but many of them didn't have any software preparation. Almost nobody had. A couple of districts had devices for all students, but not very many. And so when the pandemic hit, school districts struggled to keep students enrolled, engaged, and serve them in a meaningful way.
Yeah.
Well, clearly, some of the first ones to fall off the cliff on that kind of a thing we're going to be 18 to 26-year adult that's dealing with their own life and already
adults.
They're an adult and they're trying to solve adult problems, and then in many cases they're unemployed or underemployed, and they don't have devices or internet connectivity.
Yeah.
And so during the pandemic, the whole region, the dropout rate had come down significantly. Statewide, it had been coming down. The region was coming down faster than the state. And during the pandemic, statewide, and even more so in the region, the dropout rate, if I could show it to you graphically, it just skyrocketed because this inability to connect well with the students and of course, to really do virtual learning well, the students need a little bit of training and so forth. And so all of this was like
learning curve.
Well, I would compare it to being part of a medic squad, in something like the Vietnam War or whatever, right? I mean, you get out there in the field and, you're a medic and you've got basic information about, how to patch up things and do different things. And you've got, a battle and you've got all these people around you needing help. And you're desperately trying to, with minimal resources, trying to get to every one of them you can and save lives, right? So I would kind of compare it to that in the pandemic. Except it's not their life that's at stake, but it's their education. And so the school districts, were kind of in a similar situation, like being in war. And so
it was war.
Here's this unexpected crisis. It's like an ambush, right? So here's this ambush bringing you all these things you were never prepared for. And you're just scrambling, and everybody's trying to wing it and come up with solutions. It's as I said, it was 100 year before it was a similar event, and those 100 years ago when there was a similar event, education was not necessarily expected to be for everybody. If you understand what I'm saying,
it wasn't institutional.
It wasn't not at the kind of scale today where it's expected that everybody have a high school diploma and
no child left behind.
Percentages go to college and no child left behind and all of that.
It was Darwinism back then.
So when I came, in May of 2022, I had several outreaches to re-engage. I was not disengaged, so during the pandemic and all, when I retired, I went into a different line of work, which was consulting, which kind of prepared me for it. I set up my own consulting firm, and I had a variety of clients, some school districts and some private business, even a water supply company. But one of my biggest clients was Doctor's Hospital. And so
Doctor's Hospital at Renaissance.
Yes, at Renaissance. And so they engaged me in November of 2019, before the pandemic, to evaluate and help them to redesign their entire employee education and training program for their 5,000 employees. And so I was that's the work I was in the middle of when the pandemic hit. So I didn't really escape the pandemic like something. I was in the middle of the hospital during the pandemic.
Not the best place to be.
So I spent the pandemic at the good bit of my time during the pandemic at Doctor's Hospital at Renaissance, just trying to and as you know, with the there was even a huge employee turnover rate, everything from nurses, whatever, and so I was kind of in the middle of assisting them with how do you onboard in the middle of this turnover the new people and get them trained, keep the existing people with all their compliance training that they're required through their different licenses and all of that, and then training for the new interventions and things like that were coming along with with COVID and everything else. So I was engaged in that work, and then in spring of 2022, I started getting the hard squeeze put on me to both from the Commissioner of Education and from the local Region 1 board to take on the leadership there at Region 1. And when I looked at the impact that COVID had on the dropout rate, on student performance, I looked at all the lost time in school and how students had really fallen behind. And so I agreed to take this on and be part of the solution to helping schools get on back on track, and not only back on track, but moving further ahead, because the world is changing, and the need to continue to adjust and get better and better. Expectations are changing of what education is all about.
Yeah, many times we've heard it from Dr. Solis from STC that the workforce, the private sector, is telling him we need to get our students certified in different industries, and we need it done quicker. 9-month, 12-month, 18-month certifications.
Right.
Can't do it anymore.
Right.
Right now, according to the 2020 census, there's about 25,000 people between the age of 18 to 25 years old without a high school diploma.
Yes.
It seems like you were, you had a smaller beta sample, right? And Hidalgo and PSJA, and now covering Region 1, it seems like you have the game plan or the business plan to attack this. How are you doing this?
So what we're doing, this past year, we kind of began at the beginning of this past year. I brought in someone very experienced that had been a leader in this work in PSJ when I was there. And this past year, we decided to kind of run a pilot for START. And so we reached out to a number of the larger districts throughout the region, and we offered to partner with them. And so we offered to provide training, technical assistance. We offered 3 levels of partnership. One in which they would become part of a community of practice, and we would meet on a regular basis and share best practices with them and provide training and technical assistance. And if they were going to start the program, go visit their sites periodically and give them feedback. The level 2 would be where we'd really give, if they wanted that, we'd give on-the-ground technical assistance at the site where they were doing this work. And then level 3 would be where we would actually operate the program for them. And so they could contract us for whichever level, that they wanted. As far as the basic information, of course, we provide that no matter what. PSJ, for example, after my departure with the pandemic and everything else, they had dropped the program. I think in part thinking, the numbers that needed have dwindled, and we'll just handle it
internally. We don't need
regular high schools and stuff like that. Well, after I brought the larger districts, included them to the table, they said, you know what, we do need to start it up again. So they started it up this past year, and they had a little over 100, 18 to 25. And so it kind of goes with us back and forth, 25 and 26. The way law works in education, when they talk about age, like when do you start kindergarten, how long can you be in school, it's all based on your age as of September 1.
Yes.
So when it says to 25, that's based on your age on September 1. So if you turn 26 on September 2, you're still eligible that whole year. So that's why kind of sometimes the confusion of, is it 18 to 25 or is it 18 to 26? Well,
okay.
It's 18 to 25 based on your age as of September 1. But you may spend that whole year, you may almost the whole year or any part of that year, you may already be 26, and you're still eligible till the next till the next September 1. And so anyway, I guess I should go back and reiterate as well, because I didn't necessarily clarify. But back in 2007, what I stumbled on in essence is that when I talk about funding for it, I'm talking about full funding, the same as any other student. So right now, statewide, it's an average about the district's yield between their local taxes and what the state provides them. It's an average about $10,000, $11,000 a student, right? And so the same funding in general, there's some factors that tweak that number a little bit, like if a student is special education, special needs, or if a student is just learning English, there's some boost to funding to deal with certain circumstances. Or if they're taking CT courses that have specialized equipment, there's a little extra funding to help the district pay for the equipment, et cetera. But by and large, on the average, it's $10,000, $11,000 a student. Well, that same amount applies if the student's 25 or 24 or 23. And so that's kind of the magic that I stumbled. So what I'm looking at here, you mentioned the 25,000, which is basically applies to
Hidalgo
County.
Yes.
Across the region, it's probably in the range of at least double that, right? Statewide, it's $250,000 at least, and that's the known population, because there's always, just like in the census, there's always the uncounted, if you know what I'm saying.
How does South Texas school districts do in comparison at statewide level?
In student performance, they do very well in comparison. In dropout rate, for decades, South Texas, like a lot of areas, they had lower economic status and so forth in the community. For decades, South Texas was much higher in dropouts than the state. In the last, let's say, 10 years leading up to the pandemic, the gap narrowed to where it was almost even with the state.
Wow!
But as you're narrowing it, you still have the older population that did not have that advantage. But so how often? So we have a huge problem. So let's go back to the Judges Prosperity Task Force.
Well, I want to say one thing really quick. So assuming $11,000 per student.
Yeah, we can use that
right?
as a proxy there.
We say we have 25,000 people in Hidalgo County between the ages of 18 to 25 without a high school diploma. There's legislation that this group qualifies under. I mean, if we do 11,000 a pop at 25,000 people, that's $275 million.
Yes.
Now, for people listening, okay, let's say that we get all 25,000 people to line up. Everyone says, "I'm ready. We're coming." Are those funds available?
Yes. There's not a cap. So this is different. Region 1, we also run the basic adult education program through the workforce board for 3 of our counties. And that kind of a program has a cap of students you can, of adults, and that's for whatever age adult. So there's a cap that you can serve, and it has limited funding. This is the same as student enrollment. If any district here, if a new neighborhood would come in, let's say SpaceX or something like that happens in Brownsville, and they bring in factories and they build 1,000 homes, and 2,000 kids come in, well, that's funded. So when new kids enroll in school, the funding comes with the kids, right? Well, it's the same thing. This is the same funding source, the exact same thing. So if you go collect, across the county, let's say, 5,000 of these, well, the funding is automatic.
There. Wow.
There's not a cap on it. There's not whatever. And so that's part of the message I'm trying to get out too. Because
that's why you're fired up.
As districts have, and that's where I was headed. Here we have a huge problem. And the county judges, I commend him for focusing on. We have a huge problem. How often do we have a huge problem where there's actually a solution and there's actually funding for the solution? That doesn't happen very often.
No.
This is an exception where we have a huge problem. We have a solution that works, proven solution, evidence-based that works,
yes,
and we have the funding for that.
Yes.
So then, in my mind, then why wouldn't we do it? And then, and on top of that, compounding that, we have school districts that are concerned because they have declining enrollment due to multiple factors, partly due to the pandemic, partly due to declining birth rates, partly due to more competition and charter schools opening up in this. So we have schools with declining enrollment, and they have empty buildings. So you have an empty building. So
the funding's there.
You have the space, you have the funding, et cetera, et cetera.
The population's there.
And
the
you're worried about not laying off employees, et cetera, et cetera.
This is it.
So it's like I once was interviewed on this, and I said that that's a win-win-win. Well, this one is like 5 wins,
Yes, yes, and, win cubed.
Yeah, so yeah, it's like win cubed. So that's the word So now that we kind of piloted, I mentioned PSJ, Brownsville also engaged with us. Wesco engaged. This year for them was a learning year. They're getting ready to kick it off and open theirs in the fall. We've got districts up the other end of the valley. We've got multiple districts now in this county, that are getting ready to pick this up. At Calchels, others are getting ready to pick this up this coming year. We have others that were engaged and kind of we're still doing it, but at a very small scale. But that small scale doesn't touch the numbers that are,
the impact,
the scope of the problem.
Yes.
So we need to match the scale of the solution with the scope of the problem. Now, obviously, the 25,000, they're not all going to get back in.
No.
Especially not initially. But if you start with 2,000, 3,000 across, let's say across this county, word starts to spread to the others. It's
a domino effect.
And so you kind of get this ongoing program.
So, we're talking about the school districts, and in my mind, it's like, okay, we need to get all the school districts on board because normally it's so we don't have funding. We'd love to do that, but the funding here is solved. The problem is solved. Now all we have to do is roll up our sleeves and do the work, essentially.
Yes.
How can South Texas College play a role in helping solve this?
So South Texas College, I think, is willing and ready. I've talked to President Solis and their leadership, and like I said, when I was in PSJ, they were my partner in starting this up. And as I mentioned, for this adult population, the high school diploma is important, but I felt like they needed to leave us with more than that. So they needed to leave us with, being employable, hopefully having
a skill set,
and some kind of, whether it's an industry-based certification, a community college certificate, but something where somebody has certified them as qualified.
Someone gave them a stamp.
And then ideally you can build into it from there. You can build into it internships and job shadowing and things like that to make it, to make it even, to assist even more. And so that's the main thing is getting the word out, and then getting, of course, school districts are overwhelmed with many, many challenges right now also. So this is kind of this new thing that in many cases maybe they haven't done at scale. And so that's why we kind of come to the table and say, we'll help you set it up. And we'll do anything from what I like to tell the school districts on any of the work we do is we want to meet you where you're at and take you where you want to go. And so if a school district is like, just give me the book and I got this, great. If a school district is like, can you train us on this? Great. If they're like, can you provide ongoing kind of monitoring and technical assistance? Great. If they want to say, you know what? Here's the building. We'll sign a contract with you and you run it.
Great.
And we'll flow that, not all because they'll need some for their overhead, but we'll flow that funding to you and you hire the teachers and you run it. We'll do that. So we'll meet the school district wherever they're at. My passion, this work is one of my highest passions. I've got 3 or 4 or 5 of them in education, but this is one of the very highest. And so my deal is that they do it, and like I said, what we want to do is meet them where they're at. One, get them to really understand. And for many times, if someone's been in education many years and unaware of this, it takes a while to get that concept, and to trust that concept. Yes, I will get the money and so forth. And so that's where we can come in, with that kind of assistance.
How do you stay motivated?
I stay motivated by student results. I stay motivated, as a principal, high school principal and superintendent. It was easy because I got to shake all their hands at graduation, and many would come back to visit me and so forth. But I stay motivated, about a couple of weeks ago, I got an email from a young lady that I was her high school principal in the early 90s. And so she sent me an email and said, Dr. King, you were one of the biggest influences in my life today. And she had taught for me for a few years in Hidalgo and then gone to the Border Patrol. So she said, today I am on such and such date, I am being named the agent in charge of a certain large operation and building, actually of the Corpus Christi area. Mm-hmm. And said, I'd love it if you could come when I receive the promotion. And
wow.
All that. So that's multiplied hundreds and hundreds of times of students that cross my path and students that I've seen their life turn around or see them on their journey to success as a young lady from very, very humble beginnings, if I remember correctly. But I believe she grew up in Las Milpas, if I remember correctly. I'm stretching way back on my memory. But to see these young people, get these kind of skills, or another young man that came to see me that came to thank me when I was towards the end of my career as superintendent of Hidalgo, and he said, Dr. King, I came to thank you because early college, I finished high school with an associate degree, dual language. I finished highly biliterate. He said I went to Texas Tech, and he got an associate degree in engineering while I was at South Texas College while he was in high school. He goes, I went to Texas Tech. He goes, I graduated in 2 years with a dual mechanical and electrical engineering. And he said I got hired by, I believe it was Train Corporation. And this young man was 20 years old. He said because of my biliteracy and how advanced I was in everything, they put me in charge of all installations from Brownsville to Laredo. And so he was 20. Or 2021. To me, that would be a mid-career kind of achievement, right?
Of course.
And he's like, my mom's ill, and now I can...
Health insurance, money.
I'm at home, and I have all the resources to...
Take care of her.
Not only provide for me and my future family, but I can take care of my mom and repay her for the sacrifices that she did for me. So, like I said, just many, many more... I can think of young people that struggled in school. I can think of a young man right now in Hidalgo, and he runs his own construction company right now. So I, when you look at those successes, that's what motivates. And the other thing that motivates me is the scope of the problem, that we are still not solving some of these problems at the scale that I believe. When I see that there's an area and there's a huge problem and it's impacting people's lives, and there's a solution, and we know what the solution is, but either through communication, through people being overwhelmed, through whatever, we're not implementing it at the scale that we can to match the scope of the problem. Then that also motivates me, because I feel like there's a reason I'm back in the game.
Yeah.
Like I said, I never fully got out of it because I was doing it.
You never left.
HR, but that I'm fully back in the game with the public schools, at scale. And I believe, I believe that our school districts and their leadership and their boards and the superintendents, their staff, want to do the right thing. I think, and so my role is to make sure they have the information, make sure, and the response that I've been getting has been very positive, and I feel that we'll have a significant number more of schools getting this up and going.
Yes.
So I think it's very helpful for the public to be aware, for the business community to be aware. I know that some of the things that we're problem solving. So, for example, if there's a business or an industry and they need young adults skilled in a specific area, especially as you mentioned, that can be quick. If it's something that where they can be trained for it in 6 months, but we need them trained this specific way, well, we can partner with them and South Texas College, or if they're in another part of our region, Texas Southmost or TSTC or Laredo College up in Webb, and we can come together and package that, and so we have these young adults, so for the business community, the economic development corporations, the chambers, and so forth, to all also be aware. Because like I said, for them as well, they operate typically on limited funds. And here we're talking about a solution that can be fully funded to the scope of the problem, which is extremely rare. Usually, I don't care whether it's flood control or whatever, it usually take decades. So you get dribbles of money and you slowly close the gap on the problem.
Yeah.
Here's one where both the solution and the funding are available to match the scope of the problem. And like I said, that's very rare.
Very
rare. I do want to mention, too, because people from other states, when we were in PSJ, we had thousands of visitors over the years. The Guardian came and covered many of those visits. We had thousands of visitors from 36 different states, even Alaska, Hawaii, and so forth.
As a case study.
And to see. And one of the things they always left, they were like, I wish our state would fund over age 21, right? And so, the fact that...
Get a legislator that'll sneak that.
The fact that Texas fully funds dual enrollment, and the fact that it fully funds this initiative up to the 26th birthday, or up to 18 to 25. Kudos to leaders in the state that thought of that, and that. And by the way, when you mentioned South Texas College, they went with me in the 2009 legislative session. We were asked to go testify about this program, and I remember being a little nervous because I thought when they see that this cost, maybe they're going to say, well, we really didn't mean that, but they passed, I believe it was Senate Bill 975, basically doubling down on the model itself. Because if you remember, the intent of the one who first did the bill was like a tutoring program.
Yes.
So they doubled down on the model and defined it more clearly to match what we're doing. And actually, the bill encourages and says that encourages community colleges across the state to engage in the work. So like I said, I mean, all the pieces are there. It takes putting them together,
of course,
and aligning it.
I want to talk about one last project that your group is working on, the Tri-Agency Regional Convener. I'm sorry. Talks about this project.
So the Tri-Agency Convener is a workforce, Texas workforce project. And so we applied for, and we were awarded to lead the project for the Lower Rio workforce area, which is Hidalgo, Star, and Willacy counties. And it's a tri-agency convener, so it's through all three agencies, but it's designated out by workforce regions. And the goal of that is to identify key workforce and educational problems in that service area, right? And bring across all sectors, so it's public ed, higher ed, the private sector, and so forth. And so what we have now, we're operating basically on a planning grant. The idea is to bring these together, identify some key issues, and so where are there key labor shortages? Where are there, and then come up with solutions. At the end of this particular phase one of the initiative, the opportunity will be there to submit the plan that's come out as a result of that. And assuming, in government funding, sometimes things change when
the study comes in,
or when administrations change, or when legislative control changes, etc. But the idea is that when these are done, then there'll be an open competition where to select the very best ones, and now provide implementation funding to support following through on the plan. And of course, the plan is there, so whether you get that funding or not, the local players can come together. I've always liked to say, and I still do, we can't wait for Washington. We can't wait for Austin. We need to come to get together and figure out how to do the work. And many times what I found in my career is that when you're doing that, Austin and Washington pay attention. And a great example is that, while yes, it was state funding, it wasn't really when we got going on that 18 to 25-year-old program, the next session we were called in, tell us what you're doing, invited testimony. And then they passed a bill saying, yes, we support that. And yes, the ADA funding, the attendance funding, is there. And so the legislature, in essence, doubled down on it and made what I found maybe inadvertently in the law and built on. They came back to say, yes, people should be doing that.
Yeah, and I think that every population, not every population in Texas is the same. Not every school district is serving the same demographic. Mm-hmm. And so because of that, there's different solutions to all of the different problems. And I find it fascinating when leadership, like you say, hey, Austin, they are watching and they're saying, okay, this is working. Let's implement that versus, hey, implement this. We think it'll work.
Yeah.
Very, very interesting. So overall, I mean, we cover everything economic development and the Prosperity Task Force. There's so many organizations across the region that are saying we have such a young population. We have industry that is coming into our region, coming south of the border, but that population, also lives in our region and works in our region.
Goes to school in our region many times.
Goes to school in our region, taxpayers. Why is education and what you're doing at Region 1 so important for all of these players that are just focused on economic development?
Right. And so the way I look at it, I think in a way we're all in the same business, and to me, I say that business is quality of life, and and we're here to serve each other. I like to say, our body was designed to be active, and if we don't stay active, we start seeing the results of that. I mean, we're all going to age. We all have our expiration date, no matter what, but our mind was designed to be active, and if we don't keep it active productively, we'll likely see the results of that. And I like to say our spirit was made to be active, and I think our main purpose in terms of our spirit is to help each other and to serve each other. And we're all here to lift each other up, and when we lift each other up, we ourselves are lifted up. Both our spirit is lifted. Feels really good when you see somebody succeed that you've helped.
Yes. So
both our spirit is lifted, but we ourselves are also lifted up. And so we're all about improving the quality of life. So education does that. Economic development does that. And so all of these things do that. They give people a better future. They give, and it affects the future generations as well as the current generation. And I'm seeing more and more here in our area, more and more partnering and aligning. And I know that when I was both at Hidalgo and at PSJ, did some, really good work with economic development corporations. Not all school districts, because like I said, people are busy, they're overwhelmed. Not all school districts understand how you can engage with economic development corporations and the benefit of that. Not all economic development corporations really understand deep engagement with school districts, and but really, I've seen a number of studies, more and more, that have come out and indicated that if you want economic development, the most bang for your buck is developing your people. If you develop your workforce, your current and your future workforce, that's actually worth more than you need a mixture, but some economic development corporations, the main thing they focus on is getting, the bigger ones, it's like getting a manufacturing firm, and that's understandable, but they're not going to come if you're not developing your workforce.
Yes.
And the little ones, like, they're real excited if they get a new Dairy Queen in town or whatever, which is understandable, right?
Yes.
They're looking at, okay, that's sales tax, that's 15 more jobs, it's whatever, something for our people to do and everything like that. But again, there needs to be at least a nice mix. And so putting it a certain amount of that. So, for example, when I was consulting and helping, like, Doctors Hospital Renaissance, and we were having a shortage in certain areas, I reached out to the Edinburgh EDC. And Doctors Hospital had started up a training school within Doctors Hospital. So they have kind of a workforce school within there. And one of the challenges was, since it's a startup school and hasn't gone through all the hoops yet to qualify for financial aid, it's like, how are the students going to pay for this? Yeah. And especially the hospital then was struggling just to survive with the financial impacts of the pandemic and all of that. And so I went to Economic Development Corporation, and they agreed to fund students for 2 or 3 different programs. If they were residents of Edinburgh, we'll pay for them to get through that program. And DHR's commitment was we'll hire them. And then Lower Rio Workforce said we'll train a certain number, a matching number, that live outside the city of Edinburgh. So we were able to combine the resources of Edinburgh Economic Development Corporation, of Lower Rio Workforce Board, and of DHR to take students through some of these healthcare pathways to get certified, so that they could get employment. And so that's just an example where, bringing all the players, and what does that do? Quality of life. You've got people getting now much better wages, than they were getting otherwise. And what do you have also? You have the staff that's needed to help people with their health needs, which is also quality of life. So at the end of the day, I kind of put it all in the bucket of quality of life.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. We all want a good quality of life. Well, Dr. Daniel King, thank you so much for your time. Continue the good fight. And I hope that after this podcast, all the superintendents across Region 1 call you to jump on all these funding opportunities.
Great.
Yeah, so thank you so much.
All right.